Before diving into today's podcast, I wanted to mention that Avex, in collaboration with Shopify Plus, has created a new ebook. It's called The Future Is Now, and it's available for free on our website. It includes tactics and trends for e-commerce in 2023, things that could help you increase sales, conversions, average order value, personalization, and various different tactics to help your e-commerce business. We've collaborated with Dynamic Yield, Order Groove, Plowball Apps, Shop Circle, Signified, VideoWise, and Yotpo. They provided a ton of content and advice. And again, it's available for free on our website. Check it out, avexdesigns.com. Just click on the Insights section and you'll be able to download it. Thank you. Today on the podcast, I spoke with Dhanesh Shelat, a global digital marketing director at one of L'Oreal's leading skincare brands and a real estate entrepreneur. Dhanesh has 12 years of experience in SEO, and prior to L'Oreal, worked at major advertising agencies across several Fortune 500 brands to help raise their organic website traffic. Originally from the UK, he's also a big soccer fan and tries to never miss a game of his favorite team, Liverpool FC. We touch on a handful of topics, including e-commerce, SEO, and artificial intelligence. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dhanesh. You're listening to the Agency X podcast, and I'm your host, John Surdakowski, founder and CEO at Avex, an e-commerce agency for high-growth brands. My goal is to provide insight into e-commerce, technology, business, and everything in between. Make sure you subscribe to be notified about new episodes and visit our website, avexdesigns.com.
Thanks, John. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you again for having me here. Really do appreciate it. My name's Dhanesh Shelat, and I work at L'Oreal as a global director on one of the leading skincare brands. And my responsibilities oversee search, web, and CRM. And then I also moonlight as a as a real estate entrepreneur as well. And I'm based here in New York.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining. I know that we met at after the Dynamic Yield conference, which was a very interesting dinner that we had, that we ended up being at the bar. And we had a pretty in-depth conversation about skincare, which was, very different from most of my conversations, but it was really interesting.
Really?
Yeah, surprisingly, not the hottest topic when I'm out drinking. Yeah. But it was a good time, and I'm glad you're able to do this. So one thing that you mentioned just now, that you're involved in search and SEO. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you got started in SEO, why, and some of your experience there. So if you could tell us a little bit about, getting started in SEO specifically, that would be great. Yeah,
that's a good question. So as you can tell from the way I speak, I'm from the UK. So I initially, I'm from Birmingham, not the Alabama version. I always joke, but yeah, for those who don't know, Birmingham is where the Netflix show, it's a UK second city, and the show Peaky Blinders is based. So I came over to the US about, it's been like over 15 years now, and I actually came over on an internship program. I was fresh out of college, and I worked at Citibank as just doing basic web development stuff, updating their intranet. And I loved it, honestly. I guess initially I didn't, though, to be fair. In New York, you go there and you have this romantic view of New York being glitzy and all that stuff. And honestly, I thought it was going to be like Sex in the City, right? When I came here, but I came early September, actually. And, New York, at the end of summer is especially if you're just landing and you're just, I'm there, got off the bus, they put all of us interns. I was on an internship, came over for an internship program, and they got, they dropped, we got off the bus, and I was like, this smells like terrible, and I'm sweating, and it's humid. Yeah. I expected, I wanted Carrie Bradshaw or whatever to like walk down the street, whatever. I was like, nah, none of that. I had a bum probably throwing trying to peel at me or something. and this was actually at Penn Station. That's where our initial kind of hotel was, where I was sharing with like a couple of other dudes. And I was like, you know what, no, let's give it. It took me at least 2 weeks, and then once we settled into our shared apartment accommodations and all that stuff, I was like, you know what, yeah, that's why this place is special. The energy, it's just and the ambition, and I learned to live it. I learned to love it, and partly it was because that internship program is like, imagine doing college again, right? You're with 120 other Brits, all basically staying in like 2 or 3 apartment buildings which are next to each other. You're all in your early 20s, and it's just having a blast. And you're interning, so you're not really for most part this is a forever thing for the most people there. It's a 1-year stint of just enjoying New York and kind of getting some work experience as well to add to your resume. But yeah, I just and I read this from Simon Sinek's book Wire, where people start with Wire. It's just like you kind of sometimes, it's only an kind of reflection that you think about these things, but it's just like, living in New York, why was I so drawn to it, right? And it's I didn't feel, it's kind of weird, it's a feeling that I didn't feel that I would live in the UK, even when I was growing up in Birmingham. London was great when I went to college, but New York just felt a good fit. And it's I can go into a number of reasons, but probably it is the energy that the city has. There's nothing like that in the world, I'd say. Certain cities have large amounts of energy.
Yeah.
Istanbul, Barcelona, I feel that a little bit, and London, of course. But I think New York just has that in kind of leaps and bounds. And yeah, I after that it was like, how can I stay, basically? And that's where resourceful mode comes into play, right? And this leads to your question, how I got into SEO. I had some web development. I did my degree was in information management systems at college. So ironically, I don't know if you spoke to many SEOs, but like they come from all kinds of different backgrounds, right? My degree was actually a really strong fit for it, but I hadn't heard of it, for a few years. I did some email, after I finished my initial internship program. I was doing a bunch of other like small internships, worked at an email marketing company, and then actually I got like a small kind of interning or consulting gig at a office e-commerce company, and I joined there, and let's just say that the leadership, it was a crazy place to work. If is it Office Space, whatever, or whatever that movie is, right? If you talk about,
is that
the movie?
I think it's Office Space.
Is it
Right?
Office Space?
Yeah, Office Space. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
There's like that, like in cubicles and stuff.
Yeah, but this was even said. The owner of this company would basically hire young people to temporary work, and the retention rate was terrible. Not many people would start. Pay them very little. But again, what I took out of it was I basically learned SEO in like 3 months, basically at that time, under the guy who was like leading SEO. On my second week, he basically was fired / left. So I was like on my own, basically trying to, and I basically reported then into the guy who led like paid search, who'd only been there for like a week or two. So yeah, picked it up. After 2 or 3 months, I was like, you know what, this is not going to lead to, this is not going to be my forever job by any means. So I was like, I had enough confidence to be like, I can do this. I can speak the lingo. And after that, I worked at a small boutique branding agency, which did packaging design, and then they upsold on sort of web development and SEO services. So that was great. Really great experience, being a scrappy startup and stuff. But again, when it comes to your visa situation, it's kind of difficult. If you're not being in that position, I think it's somewhat hard to relate. But having stability is super key when everything else seems so unstable. Because for me, I wanted to live here. The end goal was like, for this was getting my green card and then being able to stay here long term. So,
and what year was this?
This was in 2009, I think. I believe 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, by the time I had the 1 year stint at my that's a small agency, and I was like, you know what, I need to, that unfortunately they were kind of downsizing, and it was sort of changing their position when it comes to that, and I was like, this can't happen again. So I was like, let's go for the larger agencies, and then I worked at WPP Group for 4.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Gratefully enough for them to sponsor my green card. Once I'd achieved that, freedom, then worked at Publicis, and then ironically that was Citibank were my client. So I interned at Citibank, right? And then 10 years later, they were my client at Publicis. So I went back.
That's awesome.
It was crazy. Crazy how that works. And and then I got kind of headhunted for kind of my role at L'Oreal. So and that's where we are now. So yeah, it's been a great journey. Search, I'd still say, I think, search is my, I have huge passion for search and the power that it can bring. But yeah, hopefully that summarized it.
No, that does. And I know that SEO in 2009 was very different from SEO now. And even before 2009, I just felt that the tactics and approaches we take to search engine optimization were very different. So I don't have a big background in SEO, but I always say that search engine optimization is really what has been the biggest driver of revenue for my business, for our agency. And we do it for some of our clients, but we're not an SEO agency. So we do some SEO work, but there's other SEO agencies that really just do all SEO. But one of the things that I did, and it was probably around 2009, similar time frame, I started to freelance and I quit the big agency world. So I was like almost looking for the complete opposite. I was going for like, well, I'm leaving this secure job to go start freelancing and just see what happens. But I got into putting up my website and making a freelancer website or a mini like agency site. And my main goal was to beat out everyone who listed for New York freelance web designer, right? Because, I've grown up in New York. I was born here, and that's where I did all my business. And I just started to become obsessed with SEO. And back then you could kind of stuff a lot of keywords. You can go for long tail keywords, and really all I did was like write a bunch of blog posts and focus on best practices. And I would say some of the things like, trying to get backlinks, focus on the domain authority. So there were some things that I think wouldn't fly right now, but it really helped build the domain authority. And I eventually did get to the top for New York freelance web designer, and we're at the top for like eCommerce agency in New York right now, and a bunch of other ones that relate to Shopify. I'm curious about, what has changed in the past, like say 10 years or so, any tactics, anything with Google, like, what are some of the things that maybe you were doing back then that you might not be doing right now? Is there anything that's changed dramatically?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, sorry, just to get out of my time, and it was more 2011. I'm just like, I went back on that, but still okay. A long time, yeah.
Within the decade type of time frame. Okay.
Yeah. Just to make that correction, but yeah, I'd say there's definitely a couple of things that I think when I first started in SEO, I remember I was one of my primary tasks was going on the Wikidfire forums. I don't know if you remember those. There was like old school affiliate marketing forums like Black Hat.
Oh yeah. Black Hat. Mm-hmm.
Buying a ton of backlinks. I think actually funny story. I was thinking about one Halloween sometime, like I was trying to get like a Wikidfire t-shirt made and like wearing a black hat. I was like, if I could be like no one else would get it. Like
99.9% of people would not get that.
Yeah. But yeah, it started with those kinds of like backlinks were just critical to just and any backlinks. And the quality wasn't a thing then. You didn't have to optimize too much for performance or anything like that really, if at all. But that certainly, for the most part, doesn't work anymore. Like, just having a ton of low quality backlinks, link farming, all that stuff. And just for those that don't know, a backlink is just a link from one site to another. And Google doesn't think of it like a voting system, right? Google will deem your site authoritative based on the backlinks that you have, right? But not all backlinks are equal. So like a link from a local newspaper is not as authoritative, say like, the Brooklyn Times. Sorry, I know you're from Brooklyn, right?
Yeah.
Or Queens,
all good. Brooklyn.
Yeah. So if it's Brooklyn compared to the New York Times, right, that's going to have a much higher sort of impact on your on the authority of your website and help it rank for keywords. So so back then we just buy a ton of links. Honestly, and now it's a lot more sophisticated. Google's advanced so much more. But just some of the, I think fundamentally, one of the key things to understand about SEO is it's not something that you do; it's something that happens when you do the right things.
That's a good way to say it.
Yeah. And it's you say the SEO is optimizing the SEO for the website. It's just doing things in the right way that's been right for a website, and it serves a foundation for everything else. If you have a strong sort of technically sound, and again we can get to the real estate side, I related to like real estate as well, like having a technically having strong SEO technical foundations, like a house, right? Strong technical foundations. If you have that, without that, then the house will collapse. It can look pretty, but it's gonna blow down when you have a hurricane or whatever. So I'd say that what I've noticed in particular is businesses and brands take an interest in technical SEO as being the foundation to help them make their media spend more optimal, right? Because particularly in the US here, compared this to the UK, it's really interesting, where SEO is like, they have some of the best like technical SEOs, I'd say. Like in the UK, it's like really big because their media spend there is much lower. In the US, because our media spend is like so much higher, it's sometimes ignored. This SEO is like still a niche practice compared to how big media and spending and all that. Even kind of e-com, comparing like the UK, it's like not as big a thing. Like
Really?
Retail. So it's super, super interesting. So a lot of these British businesses come to US to get that business. I realize it's such a huge opportunity. Whereas SEO is still very big in the UK.
Maybe it's the competitiveness of it, but I back for a second about the backlinks. And I know that that's something I used to do, buy some backlinks. I didn't do it in mass quantities, but I did buy some backlinks for certain keywords some time ago. I wouldn't call it black hat. Maybe it was like gray hat. It's probably like gray hat. Whatever's in the middle of white hat and black hat, I guess it's just
you're right, that's it. It's a gray hat. Yeah.
All right. It was on the border. But like, I'm assuming that Google still prioritizes websites that have considerable amount of backlinks, quality, do follow links. So let's just say you're a DTC skincare brand, for example, since that's where you have a lot of experience, or any other e-commerce brand. Should they be actively trying in an either organic way or even reaching out to publications to try to get do follow links? Like, should, instead of like saying, hey, we're going to go buy like 500 links, I'm not saying to do that. That would be a really bad idea. And you're probably going to get red flagged on Google and it's going to destroy your business in the long term. But let's just say, you launch your brand. I don't think that should be your number one priority. But as time goes on and you want to focus on optimizing your website for search, would it make sense to try to hit up publications or do like guest blog posts? Like, we get like a lot of requests from companies who want to do guest blog posts on our website so that we could link back to them. Is this something that e-commerce brands should be doing to try to rank for a certain keyword or a certain product, trying to get on like top 10 lists or trying to get mentioned? Is that something that they should be actively doing, and would that help their SEO?
So it's a great question, and I'd answer that. I'd say yes, but with caveats, right? I think personally, I don't believe the outreach that we were so accustomed to, in the SEO space for many years, to literally asking, hey, can you provide me a link? Here's an article, etc. I think it's more about public relations and actual relationship building, right, with these large identifying authoritative sources, right? And today we can have, there's tools that you can figure out which websites have more traffic than others, right? Identifying those. So again, New York Times, I keep biased towards them. There's one I can think of. Being in New York, I have a bit of a bias towards them, but that they have so much viewership, right? If you can get, be positioned to be featured on the New York Times, then great, obviously. But also, again, if it's a local publication and it's relevant, then that's just as important. But I would say, find a resource or a partner, right? Form these partnerships that can be, it's simply a value exchange, right? You're providing value to this particular publication's audience. In return, they're providing you a reference. And if we spoil it down to that, I think it's a very fruitful task. I think where it gets a little, where, specific SEO companies and stuff they sell this backlinking stuff, and they just try and, reach out to as many, lower level publications or lower level lower quality websites, and just try to build these lower quality links. And, I just don't think that's a very fruitful task. Even if it's someone kind of entry level doing this, reaching out, it's not fun and it's not scalable. I'd say focus on forming genuine partnerships and having those synergies.
Yeah, and just creating good quality content on your website too, so that other websites and blogs will link back to you. So one thing that really helped our SEO, like for our agency, was I wrote a blog post in 2012 that is still one of the top ranking blog posts on our website, because it was about making YouTube videos responsive. So if you Google YouTube responsive HTML or make YouTube videos for responsive design, like this is when responsive design was coming up, a lot of schools picked it up as educational material, as an example for students. So I got a lot of .edu links. I also got a lot of other bloggers and other resources, or like forums and boards that were linking to it because it was a good resource for just a quick copy and paste little code snippet, right, that I wrote, like some JavaScript. And everyone was linking back to it. So I didn't try to get those links at all. So like the best performing like backlinks that you're going to get, or the way that you're going to build, I think, authority, is by writing really great content that other blog posts or sites are going to want to link back to you as a resource. So I think that is something that a lot of, like, especially e-commerce brands, I almost feel like their blog or their that section is very secondary to them. And when some of the brands ask us about SEO, I try to shift the conversation exactly to what you mentioned before about public relations. There is almost a very fine line between, like, SEO is a very broad term, but there is a fine line for what people use the term SEO for and like public relations, because a lot of what offsite SEO, I believe, is what you just mentioned, forming those really genuine partnerships with publications that can link back to you organically. Or maybe there's financials involved in it, and there's it's a value trade, like you said. And also doing things on site. So I think there's a lot of confusion around SEO, and we try to navigate that. That's why we don't offer it so much as a service, because brands will ask us, like, can you SEO our website, or can optimize our website from search? And there's not this magic wand that you can just wave over a website to make it. You have to focus on technical SEO. You have to focus on creating great content, and also getting those people to link back to you, websites to link back to you, but organically. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and like the best practices that you could do. And I like the way that you put it, is that it's something that happens to you when you're following like those best practices. So it's very fine line between like that PR and and also technical SEO side of it. So this is something that comes up a lot at Cerave. You don't sell direct to consumer on the website, but you do link to eRetailers. We actually get asked that question a lot, whether it's, you have a Shopify store or an e-commerce website that has that e-commerce feel to it, but it links to retailers, right? It may link to I'm not saying that this is what you guys link to, but in some cases an Amazon, right? Or a Target, or like a Sephora or something like that, or a pharmacy. Does that impact SEO, being that you are now pushing a lot of your traffic off the website because there's like a drop in page, drop off in people visiting the website? There's no true conversion. Does that impact SEO in any way? Because we actually get asked that a lot, and I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So in our case, when you have a non-DTC site, right, and you have, the websites I worked on, they have a multi-retailer pop-up.
Okay.
I think it goes back to thinking about the consumer and the consumer journey holistically. What does the consumer want from this experience, right? So in our case, right, we were originally just linking to Amazon. And the reason why we went to a multi-retailer pop-up is, while Amazon's amazing, and that's where we must have a lot of Amazon fanboy and girls, but not all consumers want to purchase it, right? They want choice.
Yeah.
And maybe Amazon doesn't even have the product there at the particular moment. So that was the reasoning behind it, is to be, it's something that L'Oreal, to the credit, is just like super consumer focused. Right? How can we improve that consumer experience? So I would say that focus on consumer first, rather than doing SEO best practice for the sake of it.
Love that.
Right.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
focus on the consumer first. I love that.
Yeah. And that's what I think that ultimately what it comes down to. If it's a case of, again, if it's going to be detrimental to their experience by going to another site that you can't control, then yeah, we should be doing that. I think it's similar to the question that we often have, and this is not just on the brands I work on. It must be a continual, a consistent question that comes up, is like, for non-DTC, for websites that don't sell direct, like non-ecom sites, should we be putting our efforts or even spend into our website, or when we can just get the sale directly from the e-retailer, right? The Amazons, the Targets.
Yeah.
I'm sure I don't know if you have that question yourself, if that's come up.
Yeah, that has come up a lot. And I guess it depends on a lot of things in the back office. It also depends on like the finances, the profit margins there, and the effort involved. And then there's the logistics side of it. If you don't want to, that's actually a big conversation in the D2C space right now, especially with brands that grew up digitally native, direct to consumer, and were not in stores, right? They were not doing wholesale at all. Wholesale is a completely different beast, and sometimes brands don't want to do wholesale, and sometimes wholesale brands don't want to do DTC because it's a very different business. It's a very different business. So sometimes brands do need to kind of figure out, do they want to take on that kind of direct-to-consumer ownership? And, direct-to-consumer brands need to figure out, do they want to jump into a completely new business model when it comes to wholesale? Because they're very different.
Yeah. It is a complex question, and I'd say, and again, if you have both, I'd say at least organically, you should be doing stuff to serve your consumer, right? What are they searching for your brand? You want to own that messaging, I'd say, because while you can wish that your e-retail partners really do represent you, you're that extra step removed from really sort of expressing what your brand represents. And I think that's on you really as the brand to really control that messaging and say, hey, look, this is what we do. And then, and this is what our value is.
Yeah. And the more focus on that, the more brand loyalty you're going to have.
Yeah.
Because that's something that is even more important nowadays with certain things with like search and or rather like iOS and the whole Facebook ads becoming crazy expensive, or like own data being very important. That at the core of that is going to be brand loyalty. The more you build brand loyalty, the more that you bring value to your customers and put the customer first, the more they're going to come back to you regardless of where you're selling, whether it's online, on an e-retailer, in a store. Customer experience and brand loyalty needs to be paramount.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an interesting thing. That's something which, it's something that I'm exploring right now, right? What does loyalty really mean, right, to a consumer? Part of my, responsibilities is kind of CRM. Mm-hmm. And, that's in my career-wise, that's a relatively new area of expertise. So I'm learning a lot. And I don't know about you, but like, when it comes to, people normally just associate CRM with email marketing. And I mean, can you think of a brand that does email marketing like really, really well?
I mean, we do email marketing. So okay. I could list a bunch of brands that we do email marketing really well, but I'm going to be biased. I think that there's some, but I would say that most of them are doing it the same. You're sending out an email. Right? I know that there's some nuances there and there's automations and tactics and things like that, but I can't think of one that stands out where it's like they're doing something that is leaps and bounds better than other brands, right? They're all kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah. I think that's what we're finding too. I think, we have to, I think it's important to email being part of the customer kind of communication process. I think that's great. And I think there's going to be so much more opportunity with, and we can talk about AI and stuff like that, of it becoming something which is I think there's so much opportunity there to have this personalization element, that, quite frankly, that will eventually happen. But then I think one thing that we really, thinking about the loyalty question overall, it's like thinking about big brands who when it comes to loyalty, like I think of like Apple, right? Nike, like these kind of brands, like thinking about what really, what really drives loyalty there. And it's something that as I said, I'm doing some research into for the last couple of weeks, and it's I think it comes down to knowing what you represent. I think being bold about it and then being consistent, right? I think that's a key. And I also think that to keep that kind of momentum, I think innovation is super key, right? I think the one thing that sometimes we don't realize is that Apple does release, every year they have this launch, right? Same with Nike, right? Sneakerheads will line up for the latest, sneaker release. And I think that's another kind of critical element for brands in particular, right? To kind of continue having that interest, because it's those, like, I think is it in the tipping point that they're referred to as mavens, those who are super fans, right? That really drive that kind of loyalty, and then the rest of the folk, I think, simply continue purchasing and out of habit mostly, right?
I mean, you bring up brands like Nike and brands at that level, and even like Supreme and Kith, like brands that people are like obsessed with. And I could say, like, to kind of bring it back to CRM and email a little bit, CRM, customer relationship management, right? Nowhere in there does it say email. It doesn't necessarily only have to be to email. You mentioned before, most people think email marketing things like that when you say CRM. But it's really about managing that relationship with your customer. Of course, there are tools to be able to do that, but there's other ways. And, kind of CRM is also looped in with customer experience. I guarantee you, if you polled Nike fans and Kith fans and Supreme customers and all of them and ask them what the top 10 things are, why they stay with the brand, I highly doubt they're going to list like email, right? Or communication, right? It's going to be more about what the brand stands for. It's going to be about the messaging. It's going to be about the style and like the culture and things like that. So I think a lot of brands also need to, understand that those are the things that should be the most important. And everything else are just tools to be able to continue to work, to continue to bring that message to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where I agree. I think it's a omni-channel approach that we live in, right? Much more media buzzwords, as we say. Yeah. But it's important to know the difference though between like omni-channel and like multi-channel, things like that, because the way that, just for those that might not be versed, is just that the consumer journey, right, is we're constantly interacting with brands across multiple devices, whether it be our and ideally we want to have that experience continue. I think Amazon, particularly in fairness to them, right, do a really good job of this, where if I'm placing an order on my phone, right, I mean, if I've got my regular whatever order of whatever I order on Amazon, on books or whatever, right, and I haven't quite considered to purchasing it yet, I can then continue, right, on the site. It knows who I am. It's got my history. Amazon, take my money, right? But,
exactly.
But they do it really well. So you could argue that from a CRM standpoint, and I think it's fair to say that Amazon do it really well.
And to jump around a little bit, because you did touch on AI, where does AI play in branding, in CRM, in brand loyalty, like customer experience? Like, I know that there's a lot of things coming out, especially with like Chat GPT, and I've been checking that out and been utilizing it. It's pretty fun. I think a lot of people misunderstand what it is. They almost think of it like a search engine, but it's really not searching the web. Basically what it is for people who are listening who might not know, everyone knows kind of, there's been talks about it, but basically what it is they taught basically the AI, right? They taught it a data set or a language. And over time, it's learned new things and they've improved upon it, but it is limited. Sometimes it gets things wrong. It's basically faking human language and somewhat of the thought behind it. But it's not a search engine. They taught it things that are going on the web, but it's not a search engine. So if like you ask it, like, what's the best local restaurant near my house? It's not doing that. It's not like a Google. It can be in the future, of course, if it learns a lot more, and if they allow it to digest a lot more information on the internet. But right now, it's just basically a data set that was kind of taught some language and things like that. Is that about accurate? And I guess the next follow-up question would be is, how is things like ChatGPT or AI going to impact brands and CRM and SEO and all of those things? Like, where do you see that going?
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And John, I think you're probably more kind of well versed in it than I am. You've definitely summarized it perfectly in terms of, I've played around with ChatGPT, and that's my understanding of how how it interprets the world. It's limited, I think, to 2021, right? It has data up until then, from my understanding. It's not, and as you mentioned, it's not connected officially to the internet yet. I think when it does, and it's able to, I think ChatGPT 4 is coming out, I think in 2 months' time, the next iteration. So that'll be super interesting. What it's developed to, but a couple of things, I guess on this, I've been very surprised by its utility, right? So I've actually used it to help create some of my LinkedIn posts.
Same.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? Not only, but also at the innovation level, the fact that it can, again, this is used from the data it's been fed. But also putting in random stuff so I'm a big Liverpool fan, right? So, I asked it to, come up with a story where Jurgen Klopp, who's the Liverpool coach, meets Joe Biden, right? So it's like it's random like that, something random like that, and see if we could interpret my, the intent and then come up with something after that. And it was super interesting. It mentioned, and then I don't know, you get pretty deep with it. I don't know how you go into a bit of a rabbit hole when you play around with this stuff. You then say, okay, what if their meeting was here, X, Y, and Z, and you get and at some point it does become a little repetitive, and then it doesn't. Yeah. It does. You can see the limitations, but yeah, it's very impressive of kind of where we are. I think there's no turning back now. I think with AI, I think it's the possibilities are limited by ourselves, I think. Right? I think their utility, like when it comes to content creation, this is nuts, right? I've been reading stuff about it won't be very long until we have a full script for a movie. I think it creates a script for a movie within the next couple of months. There'll be, we've got text to images. I think Google just came out with their latest one. Is it Mensa or something? I think, or Muse. Sorry, Muse. They just came out with Muse, which is their text to image engine. So photorealistic images based on text, and there's a few of them. Midjourney does this as well. Right? There's when it comes to the creative world, this is fascinating, right? I think this just someone who doesn't have this, for me, like, I have very little like kind of artistic capability, and for me just to come up with like random stuff and be able to have these not only visualization texts, movies that will be created. I think it won't be very long until we have a full feature length movie created purely on AI.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. I think in the very short term, and it's about there, it's a tool to be able to help with content creation, things like posts or blog posts or Twitter threads and website copy. It could almost do that perfectly now. So 2-3 years from now, it's going to be a really important tool. I agree with you there, for content creators, designers. I think, and I don't know what the timeline is, and I'm not going to speculate. I don't think that it's going to completely replace like developers and designers in the very near term, but eventually it will. If we're at this point now, eventually you're going to be able to ask it to create the perfect high converting website or app, and it's going to be able to do that based off of a lot of data. And it could get creative, it could write it could do code. It's very in its infancy right now, and it's going to be some time before it learns. I think the first step is going to be tool for content creators. It's going to work its way into a lot of SaaS companies and be some sort of component within a lot of these SaaS companies, and like level them up to being really important. And then eventually it's going to, replace a lot of jobs. It has to, because unless we put a stop to it, unless, it's like, okay, this has gotten too crazy, we're going to just stop innovating, which I don't ever see happening. It's going to replace a lot of jobs. And I don't know if that's 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I'm not that well versed in AI, but it eventually will. It has to. I can't imagine it not getting smarter. Considering where it is right now, and it's in its infancy, imagine when it's 20 years old. I just don't know. I don't think that it won't get to a point where it takes over the world. It has to. Yeah, no,
I think I love this, and this is, we talk here now, right? I mean, I'd love to see how this is in a year or two, but we as humans, we find it difficult to understand timelines that are exponential. Right, we think of, and we relate this in success as well, right? You probably see it as you're a successful entrepreneur. You've probably, I don't know if you saw at the time that your success would be exponential, right? I think we also see this with progress. We see things in a very linear way. Like, we think about your job, you get promoted step by step. I get whatever, AVP, VP, whatever, SVP, whatever. We see that done in like a very linear way. Traditionally, our minds, our society, puts us in that way. But often success or progress is exponential. So particularly with AI, this is where I think we're just at the tip of it being of seeing exponential progress. And I think some people are going to be scared. So if I'm scared by that, I'm more of an optimist. I'm super excited by it. I'm like, wow, this is, some of the stuff I read. I'm reading articles about this on the daily when I have a spare moment. But it's super interesting what it can do.
Yeah, I think right now it's like at a point where we have complete control over it, and it's not going to learn more or get to a point of absurdity without human involvement. But there will be a time when it starts learning on its own and we have less control over it. Now, I'm thinking very far into the future, thinking things like Terminator and Matrix, like those movies coming true, where it actually,
right? Yeah.
I think it becomes dangerous. I think it's great for, things like helping it build a website or helping brands increase revenue or like helping to make certain decisions. I think it could be really good in medicine with helping to try to find solutions to certain things. Where I think it could become very dangerous is when they start to, and if you think they haven't already have been doing it, but working it into like military type of applications, because that's when it could become extremely dangerous, and that's when those movies come true, when you start to work it into that. And look, if they have to be thinking about that, certain governments, including our own, are probably exploring ways to leverage AI for defense, and that's something that is a little scary when you start to think about it outside of just marketing and like creative applications. When you start to think about it as being used for not for good, or it could be intended to be used for good. Let me rephrase that. It could be intended to be used for good, but if we don't have that control over it and it continues to learn and figure out, at some point it's going to realize that like humans are not in its best interest. So that's the scary part, and that's the part that like movies are made of. So I mean, I think we're thinking 50, 100 years into the future, or maybe beyond, but that's the part that interests me the most, and it's a little scary, but it's also one of the most interesting aspects of it.
Yeah, I don't know. So on that point, you raise a very good point about, and maybe it's just me kind of shutting myself off from those scenarios. But no, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
I hope I'm not. But
I mean, for every good utility, there's going to be equally, or potentially equally as hazardous utility for it. I think just to go back to your point about marketing, though, real quick, I think you make a really interesting point about how we continue to learn data and creative on the fly, right? I think the other element is personalization, right? What if like these, ads and it's literally taking in data on a personal level and adjusting it in real time, and I don't think we're very far from that, honestly.
No, I mean, we kind of do that a little bit now on like websites with personalization. We use dynamic yield for things like that, and it kind of uses some AI there. But as that gets far more advanced, imagine you visit an app or a website or some sort of digital experience, and you start mixing that with like, I'm not a huge fan of metaverse and crypto and all of that stuff. I think it's interesting, but I'm not a huge fan of it. But you start mixing that with AI and VR. Now you have this completely immersive, highly personalized experience that wasn't just like made for you. Like most websites are made for a customer. You're putting them down a funnel. But as we start to get into AI and things like that, or the metaverse or VR, you start to think about these highly personalized experiences where it knows exactly who you are and how to change the experience for you. Not only just images and text that could be A/B tested or things like that. But the actual customer experience is more tailored to who you are as a person, because it's making these like kind of personalized assumptions based off of artificial intelligence. So like, don't know when that is. I don't have a timeline on that, but it's all extremely interesting things. And like, you're right. We're kind of doing some of those things right now, but it's just so early. Even though it feels like some of us have been in this industry for quite a long time, you're talking about 10 years, 20 years or whatever, it's still very early. And that's something that really excites me and gets me really into some of this stuff around technology and e-commerce.
Yeah. And I think it's like, and those who are the ones who are early adopters will be the ones who will really benefit from, like any new technology, right? If you're prepared to really dig your heels deep, right, and understand, and like for example, one of my mentors was he's been speaking about natural language processing and GPT 1 or 2 when it was years when it was first in its infancy, right? I think it's taken a while to get to this point where GPT-3 is just like it's close to, if there's some people passing the Turing test, right? Is that where you can't interpret right between a human and a machine? But he was talking. He was speaking of this for a few years now, and he's been leveraging it to kind of create meta descriptions in SEO. Right. As soon as I started messing around with ChatGPT-3, this has been the latest. This is the only kind of version of the tool I've kind of messed with. I was like, the meta description is dead. Like, I will never have to create a meta description for a website ever again. It's done.
Basically.
So just for those who don't know, a meta description is like about 177 characters that basically summarizes what a web page is about. It doesn't really affect ranking, but if you're in Google, it will. Google doesn't always, but it will select potentially that description below your kind of website link as described what the website's about. So and that's typically because this doesn't affect ranking. You don't put keywords into it. You have to do a ton of keyword research. It's just basically coming up with copy. So
doesn't even affect ranking. I put so much effort into my meta descriptions in the past. I think it used to, but it doesn't anymore. You're right. When you search, it more so grabs the relevant copy that's on the actual website nowadays. But it used to be that you'd have keywords and meta descriptions, and when you search for something, Google would display the title of the page, the keywords, and the meta description in the body there. It would scan, but it wouldn't really display the body copy. This was back in the day, but now, I don't know. I'm still trying to game that system. Dhanesh, we're at about time. I know I wanted to get into your experience with real estate investing, but we might have to save that for a separate podcast. Sure. We jumped around a little bit from e-commerce to SEO to AI taking over the world, which I think is a pretty good range of topics. Anything else you wanted to touch on? Otherwise, really, really glad you were able to join, and thanks for taking the time today.
Oh, thank you. No, your questions were fantastic. Hopefully it's helpful for your audience. I hope it is. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. So appreciate you.
Cool. Excellent. Let's do it again, and we'll work in some other topics next time.
For sure. Appreciate it. Thanks, John.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Agency X podcast. I really hope you enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please make sure to subscribe. If you want to learn more about our services, you can find me on LinkedIn. You could also find me on Twitter @JSurda, or visit our website avexdesigns.com.